here we are. So let's talk about this API. I feel like we talked about this one a fucking million times.
Oh, wonderful. So if you, I don't know if Steve's on the call, but if you scroll down,
He's not.
I think he said you could do this using the regular synchronous APIs.
Yeah. So it completely works to use the synchronous one and just in the task. Everybody, I think it didn't work on Framework, but we made it work on Core. Everybody thinks it doesn't work, and then they ask for it, and like, fine, we'll add the method here. It literally just calls the other implementation.
So just for some context, I think there's like two APIs, right? So there's one API that is basically start impersonation and revert or something, right?
I think we got rid of that one.
And that one we killed because basically everybody forgets to call the revert one, and then you have basically issues with security, right? Versus this one is you pass in a delegate, and so the thing will basically do the revert for you. You don't get to run indefinitely in impersonated context, right? But I thought didn't we already add that API? I feel like we already have this.
Well, the method we have works. So it's in Framework, it used a thread static, so it didn't work as soon as you hit an await. In Core, it has an async local, so it does. But people, yeah, people believe what people believe, and this method is more about signaling than it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So this one is basically, it's adding the async overload. Oh, I see. No, I didn't see that earlier.
And the comment somewhere in the bottom is, okay, the implementation of this will just be to call the existing method, but this one says async, so people are happy.
So this is an impersonated task.run.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, well, it's not even task.run because it's still synchronous. Well, it still invokes your callback on the current thread.
Why is it sync?
Because it returns a task.
Because you want to give it an async. And
basically,
okay, so
what you could do is
the async across.
yeah.
No, so you could call the synchronous version and return a task if you wanted to, because the synchronous version returns a T. This is literally a wrapper around the synchronous version.
Public static, task of T, run impersonated, async of T, blah, blah, blah. Arrow, run impersonated, same arguments.
Yeah.
This is literally, we're just putting async on the existing thing because people keep saying, oh, but there's no async version. It's like, fine, now there is.
I mean, if the base API is challenging for people to use correctly, then maybe there's some merit here.
But I'm going to pump this back to Steve because he didn't comment why it doesn't take cancellation.
So I was about to ask, like, this is a very long conversation. I feel like we don't have the right people in the room to make a call on this one. I wanted to just skip this one. I mean, this was filed in 2017, so what's a couple more weeks at this point?
You could capture it.
So Steve needs to say that.
All right, Jeremy, this is yours clearly because it uses many words that I don't know what they mean.
Incorrect. This is stuff.
So
good for you.
I have an apprentice.
Yeah,
hey,
so,
Jeremy.
yeah, this how to put it easily. This API allows you to take some kind of, let's say, call it a bad key and convert it into something reasonable, and basically use it as a key generator. Kind of consists of two methods, extract and expand. Extract is kind of taking the bad key, or what they call it, input material, and converts it into reasonable. And the expand method takes the actual key, which is the converted other key, and more reasonable, and allows you to generate another keys from that. And the derive key method, in our case, kind of combines the two of them.
So does the caller know the size of the thing that it's extracting?
The caller presumably understands what HKDF is.
So if you scroll down and actually,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the APIs, and it seems like I mean, there's one that returns a byte array, which is fine, but the other one, you pass in the span that we write to. This one here, and I'm wondering, like, how does the caller know how big that span has to be?
so
Basically, based on the hash algorithm they use, the output is gonna be different, but we'll kind of throw the exception.
Yeah, but the caller, in principle, does know what size they need to allocate. Do they just guess and then catch the exception?
so 99% of people are never of the people who are going to use this API, 99% are never going to call extractor. They're going to call derive. Derive key just does extract and expand for you, but there are different specs that talk about like using the extract step from HKDF, and so we're giving the idea is to leave those public for the people.
Yeah, to me, it's like I have no opinion on HKDF or how popular. I'm just more or less asking from the normal pattern point of view. Didn't we say like the caller has to be able to predict the size, right?
You
Right.
can
So
predict it from the hash algorithm.
the caller, the first argument is the hash algorithm name that determines the output. Or that determines the number of bytes written.
So if I use SHA-1, then I know it's whatever SHA-1 size is,
Yeah.
right? And then I see. And then derive key also gives you something back, but what is that output?
This is the drive key.
It fills the span. Oh,
The-
sorry,
the-
derive, yeah,
The,
derive
the
key.
length is basically arbitrary. Usually, it's some kind of multiple of the.
How do we have some APIs taking byte?
Yeah, so we basically made one overload which allows you to not allocate, and
That's our guidance. for
the
buffer.
other one is simple, basically. The client don't care.
But is there a reason to set one?
Our guidance is have one that takes span and then have one that takes byte arrays.
Yeah, the byte array ones
Okay.
we've seen in practice tend to be.
In particular, the ones that return the byte arrays. They don't care to compute.
There's no point in returning a read-only span. Right? I mean, like if you produce a brand new value, you might as well give them the actual type because it's at that point it's their instance.
No. I'm not talking about the return. I'm talking about
Yeah, so from the surveys that we've done, like our conclusions have been that most people would prefer array-based.
Right, but then the question would be, why don't we have ones that take read-only span, and then have the byte ones forward to the read-only span one?
That's what they have here.
No, we've got one that returns a byte array and takes byte arrays, and we've got one that returns span, takes read-only spans. We don't have
Fills
one
the
that
span. Doesn't return a span. Very different.
Yeah, I guess I don't
We
see what you're
don't-
asking.
we don't have one that returns a byte array but takes in read-only. I think is the question, which means that you either have a slightly failure case path if you want to use spans, or you have to go the allocation path. You don't have an in-between of, I'm fine with an allocation of the return, but I've got memory that exists in native code, for example, that I'm
About to
passing
array.
in.
this is a more advanced API. Do we need the easy mode overloads?
So the easy modes are for languages like COBOL.NET probably can't work with.
Yeah.
So this is a
The ultimate fallback, right?
yes. This is don't depend on the implicit casts down to span. Don't like people think they're working with byte arrays. Let them work with byte arrays. This is a convenience thing. It has no distinct implementation. It's simply there for helping people out. But yes, the guidance we have for buffers does in the end for like the one method you can end up with like overloads by following every consider. And so it's you have to start somewhere. People ask for the other things, we can do them. But like the derived key one, there's no wrong answer you can put for the span that it fills because it just fills it. Your span determined the way. So the only one that can ever fail is extract.
Extract and expand is most likely people will just use the drive key because that's what most of this specs kind of go for. But like this is an option because the spec kind of doesn't say not to do.
IKM material? Is IKM?
It
So
stands for IKM.
Okay.
It's what the spec says.
Oh,
Yeah. For most of the crypto stuff, we haven't really gone for friendly names for parameters. We've just matched whatever the name in the specification is.
But yes, I believe it is input. There might be an initial.
Yes,
key.
it's
So one question I have is, why does the span version of expand force you to pass in an info and the other one does not?
You can't have a default. I guess
null
you can
and
have a
empty are
default
the same
readable
thing.
span.
Yeah, because null over a span is just default
Just
span.
default, yeah.
In the algorithm.
But we
null-
would have to swap the order at this point of the arguments to make the info last, which would kind of make it weird when you switch on another.
But it's already weird, right? Because the expand one that takes a byte array, you have to pass in the output length, and then you pass in the info, and the other one you just pass info, and then you pass the output span. I think actually swapping them would make them more consistent as well.
Oh,
I mean, the shape is different, but like it's still.
right. So you didn't mean can it be null? Why is that?
Yeah, why is it not optional, basically, right? Because the other one, you basically explicitly say, like, yeah, you can omit the info. And here you say, no, you have to pass me one. And then, yeah, if you accept default, that's not visible in the API signature, right?
Could I?
And let me try to.
Can default.
Yeah, you just do equals default. Yeah, the question is just where do you put the span, the output span in all cases? Because for example, for extract, there's no logical place to put it like for expand there is.
Well, it's the same as with, the other one, right? The output length comes before info, so I would just move the output span before the info.
I can't remember from the top of my head, but one of the info or salt, I can't remember which one, like the kind of null is not exactly equivalent to because like in one of the cases the length matters and the other one, like in one of the cases like zeros length span is equivalent to 20 zeros. In the other case, the null is kind of different than.
I wouldn't think the
Null would
implementation
mean
was
20 bytes long, or like whatever the
Yeah. Well,
algorithm
I
is.
don't think this implementation should care about the difference.
Because the spec calls it out, but I think since it's an input into HMAC, which gets right padded with zeros anyway.
I can't remember if this was for both or just one.
We can't move the span before info. It's going to cause bugs in codes because bytes implicitly convertible to read-only span.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone has a read-only span or if they've got like because arrays are implicitly convertible to read-only spans and because the last parameter of each would be optional, you could end up passing in a read-only span and an array meaning to be the salt and end up with the wrong overload, confusing yourself on what you meant to call. It's the problem of having two overloads that have optional parameters. And especially when you've got implicit conversions between.
Which is why we say don't have implicit. There are more than one overload with optional parameters.
Maybe I'm not seeing it, but like one would basically have an additional int parameter in there.
No, with that expand and derive key you can do it on, but extract you can't.
Yeah. Extract would be problematic and derive
it's
key
the same
would be
problem there, yeah.
problematic.
But derive has a length in the array one that it doesn't have. Because the span one uses the span.length as the
I see that now.
So the derive key is unambiguous default arguments, but extract.
I mean, at that point, maybe it's easier to just say that the span ones are the more advanced ones and just nothing is optional. You have to read the docs. But then I would at least still align the int output length and the info one. I would not swap
agree
them.
with that.
Either put output length at the end or put info before. But you can't do info before because that doesn't work for optionality. Yeah.
So yeah, so expand can be hash algorithm name PRK output info, and it's just defaulted. I mean, like it could be in everything except extract. So extract, the salt would have to be present.
Allow people passing in.
I think if we just document, probably.
Yeah.
What does PRK stand for?
The
Random key.
Okay, I was hoping it wasn't pointer to result key.
It stands.
They also sometimes call it as no.
It stands for PRK because it's what the spec says.
So does that mean salt is actually byte bracket question mark?
No, because this library hasn't gotten.
I believe Emo was saying we should put nullable enable at the top of all of these.
Well, at least to make it clear that you have thought about it, right? Right now, I would assume you didn't, but based on
The fact that it's defaulted suggests.
well, I mean the default ones, yes, but yeah, good point. Clearly, you did not, because otherwise there would have been some question marks somewhere.
I think it gets easier once projects, like when the project's ref CS itself is up to date, then you prototype it. It's written right there.
Yeah.
So I remember we used to have a guideline saying if a name is an acronym, 3 letters or more, only the first letter is capitalized. That would look a bit strange here. We'll follow that.
I think in crypto we have given up on that, given the overwhelming majority of APIs not follow this pattern, like SHA-1.
But those
I mean, it's just bankruptcy in crypto.
Yeah. Like I will say in the book, I did add an annotation, which is people think crypto has an exception. No, every single one of these is wrong.
Well, no,
The
it
only
is. Yeah,
exception
it is
we make,
wrong. But
is
I
for
think it's just that at this point, it's just starting that convention in crypto namespace also does not add anything.
No, because like AES is capital A, lowercase e, lowercase s. ECDSA is big ECD and little s, little a.
Sure.
Like all of the new things we have been doing it right. The problem is HKDF technically it stands for HMAC-based extract and expand key derivation function, but it's just called HKDF, and so we can write it as big H, little k, little d, little f, but that
It also looks weird.
feels weird.
Yeah.
So,
But all they're different from SHA. It's the same thing, right? Everybody says SHA, even though it's an abbreviation, clearly, right?
but again, like that one was in the past.
No, sure. Like all I'm saying is that, like to me, that's why I'm saying within crypto, the reason I don't care is that it is already more or less arbitrary in that API surface, right? Like I would care much more in, let's say, collections generic or something. It's like, no, we have been very consistent here. We should keep that. And that's why I'm saying in crypto, like, yeah, I mean, we can go one or the other. I would not ask you to make it all caps, but I would also not like kill somebody over. Let's make that the rest of the framework consistent, because no matter what you do, it's always going to look hilarious, right? Like that's
Right. And I mean, we could expand it and call it HMAC key derivation function.
Couldn't we call it hash KDF?
The H stands for HMAC, which stands for hash-based message
We
authentication.
should probably just keep the capitalization.
honestly like HKDF is
It
fine.
looks nicer to keep it as it
Right.
is.
If it was any other
Sure.
word we could glue before or after it, then I would.
I would have never found it if it was called hash KDF.
We don't use an acronym for PBKDF.
PBKDF1 we call password-derived bytes, except password-derived bytes violates the PBKDF1 spec. And PBKDF2 we call RFC2898 derived bytes, even though both PBKDFs don't define the same spec.
So ASP.NET actually has a class called PBKDF2 or a method called PBKDF2. Only the P is capital.
I think I need to be in.
So, but could this be like HMAC derived bytes, something like that?
Or what
But
about
it's not extending derived bytes.
what about Mac capital K EF?
Are you trying to make anyone's life
I
easier or harder?
I retract my original question.
I had this entire argument in my head and then said
Because you know better than I do.
So I can't. This does violate the rules. The correct rules I think look terrible. I can't think of a better thing to do. There are no words we can really glue on the end because we shouldn't put derived bytes on it because it's not a derived bytes type.
And keep in mind these
They don't want it to be
guidelines.
because they're all terrible.
These guidelines aren't also like set in stone. We must follow them like under penalty of
We
death.
should
or
make
something.
the API looks as easy as possible.
Yeah.
And, like make it kind of obvious.
Yeah, like
HKDF
this
makes
makes better.
sense.
Python just uses all lower.
Go with that.
You know, if we had a case insensitive.
No, thank you.
4VB. 4VB.
That can come after we remove semi.
All right, should we move on? Because I don't think we will find a better naming convention inside of crypto. That seems like a PhD thesis worth of material.
Right, so
We should just say that.
I mean, yes, but if we called it RFC 5869 key derivation, no one will find it.
All right, I'm closing this tab.
Okay, thank you, Christoph.
Okay, this is probably also something where Steve would be helpful. So let's just skip this one, because he would know what to do there. Anybody's
Yeah, I
context
can
on that?
speak to this.
Perfect.
This is just a feature that we have on basically all of our async APIs that have a callback of some sort, allowing us to turn off execution context flowing for performance reasons. Socket async event are a few places that don't have it.
Why would the event args have that? That seems like a very weird place to put that.
This event args has a callback. Whenever your socket operation gets called.
But
Yeah,
at the point
generally,
you
these
create,
things are created by the runtime, not by you.
No,
generally speaking.
no, this one's exposed specifically for performance.
Isn't like you expect application code to construct the args type?
Yes.
maybe I don't understand, but
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
if you
Who's
say
firing the
callback,
event?
I mean, the callback receives the args, right? So how does it help you at that point?
This one, it's modeled this way because it kind of closely wrapped IO completion ports, which needed to derive from an overlap structure. But yeah, this thing makes you call it for any of the async methods. The static socket.connect async only supports this method.
Yeah, but who? And I guess coming back to the original question, like, what application code would ever construct an instance of this type
Apparently
and flow it
6%
down?
of things that have gone into API port.
Anyone who's looking for
6%
probably
construct this.
But
Percent
construct
usage on a
Yes.
constructor.
How is it possible? Construct
You
this
construct it, you
No,
add some
they-
state to it, and
there's
then
a
you
public
call async methods
Zero
that
argument
use that
constructor. This
state.
Oh.
proposal is to make the Boolean one also public.
Where's source.net right now? Is that gone, or is it just down?
Source.net is
Source.net's up.
is working yesterday.
I'm looking at it right now.
My browser is showing me the donut.
Oh, it's showing you the APIs of .NET logo.
Funny enough, APIs of the net is also not coming back. Actually, is it? Here it is. It's back. It's back, baby. Okay, now it's finally there. All right, maybe it's just my machine being overloaded with encoding the video. What is that socket
It does
async?
seem weird that someone outside this type is like, it's weird for code that's not the one raising the event to ever create the event arg. Yeah, you've
Yeah, it basically just prevents having to allocate a bunch
Yeah.
of objects or pull them behind.
So if users are now allowed to specify this parameter, should it be exposed to the property?
Maybe another something that Stephen brought up is that we typically name safe whenever there's an execution context disabled.
Yeah, that's
So a
funny with the constructor though.
property or static method, any of those.
Static method for what?
Static, like, instead of a constructor, making it be a
Static method.
factory, so you can stick the word unsafe in it.
It makes it difficult to
Unsafe
subclass some. There are subclass types, at least internally, that
Yeah,
call
this
that
is very
constructor.
common. They said
You can make that constructor protected, and you can
Okay,
make
yeah,
the
that would work.
unsafe create with no execution context, whatever you want to call it.
But at that point, why not just make this public and then name the parameter unsafe flow execution?
Because it never exists on the code side. That's the problem.
We
But it does
generally
show
we
up in
want
IntelliSense.
people to write. We literally want people to go on the keyboard and type UNSAF. Generally,
Yeah, or at least capture it.
No.
Yeah, but
Tabs don't exist.
Well, it's good for showing up during like code reviews, right? Someone
Yeah.
reviewing someone calling this wouldn't realize that it.
You introduce select the derived class, inherits from socket async event args, and just call it unsafe args.
But again, that's changing somebody's. Yeah.
Can we just make this a property?
it's read-only right now.
You don't really want.
Because it's init only.
You don't really want while an event is firing that somebody can change
Yeah,
the
that'd be
value.
weird.
So.
It's really
Yeah,
constructed.
so I'd suggest make this protected because if inheritance is a scenario for this type, and then make a static create as the public method, and then the general guidance is if you're accepting something via a constructor or a factory that you give it back to the user so they can track that this is actually the one that.
No, I agree.
The static method does make it weird if you derive it. Then you're basically
You can say new, and then
you can say new or you can make a static method. It kind of, but it makes it weird to follow the same pattern.
it turns out suppressing execution context is
Yeah.
a pattern that we don't want to be easy.
Right.
Is it weird to have public constructors and public create methods on the same class?
Yes.
Well, we do it sometimes.
It's not
Sure.
unprecedented.
But again, the problem would be if you just see new socket async event args of true in a code review, you might be like, I wonder what that boolean is, but then like, I probably don't care, and then you move on. And but if it says socket event args dot create unsafe, but you're like, what are you doing?
You could also make it an enum if you want. If you really wanted to have a constructor instead of a static.
Actually, that's not a bad idea because then we can name the enum member unsafe, whatever, and then that's actually a good idea.
We're not using it anywhere else that we have.
Yeah,
So
and
it's a little.
But do you have it as public anywhere else
there's
as a
also
bool?
there's a champion language proposal that enums will eventually become context sensitive, so you don't have to use the name of the type to access the members of the enum, provided it's being used directly for a parameter or assignment. I think Neil's the one that's championed that. So if that gets in, then you're going to be in the same boat. In which case, just to keep the bool exposed.
No, because you can still call the member unsafe, not flow execution context.
Yeah, because that would be
You
the
still
name
have
of
to type
the,
that
of the member.
Yeah, you will not name the type something
And
unsafe.
you can already do that with the using static.
Yeah.
I think that's not a bad idea, but just the consistent one place that actually.
I mean, again, as far as I know, this is the one place that you're using that as a
Yeah.
boolean in a public API.
I mean, in general, like every time somebody has a public bool on a bool and a parameter, like generally speaking, we try to avoid that because it's always unclear what true false means from the call side, right? I mean, in my own code, I usually use named parameters so that at least it's somewhat clear, or assign a local variable with some meaningful thing. Otherwise, if you call a method, you said true, false, it's like, oh, that's just great.
Yeah,
Thing
so
doesn't matter
that's-
at once.
I'm fine making this protected and
I mean, we have done this before. We have a fuck ton of enums in the BCL that only have two members because we just wanted to name them. I mean, it's not. There's enough prior art for that, I think.
Value task source on completed flags has this as an enum. It's a flags enum. There's a use scheduling context as one value, and then flow execution context is it. So it's not unprecedented that this is represented by an enum either.
Yeah, I mean, if we already have an enum, maybe we should use an existing one, but I don't think we have an existing one that actually mirrors what we want to do here.
Even if it has
sounds
the
like it's not
same
called
members,
unsafe.
it probably doesn't have a very applicable name.
Yeah.
Right, this is for value task.
Yeah. It'd be pretty weird for a socket async event args to be taking of value task options.
yeah.
Yeah, I was more talking more generally, but yeah.
My point was just that's how it's represented publicly.
You could. What do you mean you're passing the address of false?
All right. So I will, because we have not really decided what the name is, I will just put in a placeholder name that makes it very clear that it needs a name, and I will bump this back as needs work.
Okay.
And then somebody can think about a name. Token underscore please underscore give underscore me underscore a.
Going to C++.
Of course, you have taste. All right, anybody has context on that?
Yeah, we have these methods that are kind of important content class that don't have cancellation support. We have these helper methods that also don't have cancellation. So this is
Also, all these methods exist, but none of them take a cancellation token.
yeah, they all exist.
Then why would we default them? Because I mean, clearly then there's an overload that takes none.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Default. Rest of it.
The zero argument overload would win because it's a match.
Yeah, it still seems weird though.
We already have
Like it's optional, but you can never call it without.
we already have the other.
Yeah, we already have other cases where we have patch async and post async that basically has an overload with and without cancellation token, without them being optional. So yeah, within the type already would be consistent anyway to just. Let me make.
Let's say the only difference of this would be better if you are marking the existing ones as editor browsable or obsolete.
Editor browsable never doesn't impact compiler resolution.
Right.
But compiler resolution
there's no
will always
ambiguity.
work.
There's no ambiguity here because the other one would just be a better match. But IntelliSense would be like, and this supports cancellation.
Confusing stuff.
Well, because if you make the other method just call this one with the argument, then in most applications it won't show up because the field just delete.
Yes.
So they won't say get byte array called get byte array. It's just
So
What do we call cancellation token? Do we call it token or do we call it cancellation token?
cancellation.
cancellation.
That's what I thought.
So HTTP content has methods named read as by that, not get it by. The client does, but the HTTP content.
Yeah, I think someone used change those to read as
Oh, you mean the verb change?
on the HTTP
Yeah.
content. It's also returning byte arrays for everything.
So that seems like just.
All right, so all the gets on content should be read as. There's a read as stream, I think. Read as
So instead of get, it should be read as.
For the HTTP content,
Yeah,
one
just
specifically. And task of you need.
Either byte array, stream, or was the other one?
String.
Well, in fairness, we didn't see it for the first 15 minutes either, right? All right, so then we have that.
according to my all of the overloads for buffer management 17.
And we get sort of file time.
I guess they're not all over.
Sounds like you
4 of
want
them start with the word try.
sounds like you want a macro.
Or source generate.
We could get a proper preprocessor. I could
CSPP.
abuse that.
CSPP can make a comeback. We had it once before.
Read-only span, array segment, array, offset and count. Oh, the 17th one was because this was far array. So.
That 18th is going to come in TF8 string.
That wouldn't be char. That would be another 17 overloads. Because it would be UTF-8 string, more than that, because you get UTF-8 string and UTF-8 span and span of char 8. So it's like 34 more overloads.
Right. So
Way to kill that feature.
I'm hexadecimal, obviously. All of those.
My feature's doing just fine,
Right.
dying on its own. It doesn't need your help.
Hey,
Like 4 times?
all right, Eric is on.
Yeah, so this one came about when I was refactoring some ML.NET stuff to use spans. And I noticed that list of T has CopyTos that take in arrays, but they don't have ones that take in spans. And like this may have been nullified since we've added the get span API on the list. But that one's like in a hidden memory marshal place, if I remember correctly.
So CopyTo, I think, is an implementation of what the I collection. I wonder if maybe this could be a use case for default interface methods.
what would we default for?
So, right, Santi asked the same question. I must have missed it. The problem is iList, you can't get at the underlying span inside of your iList, right? Because really what you want to do here is a span CopyTo span,
Right. Dims
which is going to do,
I mean,
which is going to be the fastest.
a dim, like a dim would allocate if we just had a default method
or array
but, or array pool, whatever. But I mean, list of T could implement it and say, "Oh, I know how to do it more optimally."
So essentially, if we think of what we would do if we added it as a default interface method on iCollection of T or wherever copy T, then we can do it here and then later decide that we want to backfill it to the collection.
So the default implementation would do a double copy, essentially.
Default
Seems like-
implementation would just loop over the thing, right? From index to count.
That's true.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
good
One,
to be
one
on
element at a time, putting it into the span.
I mean, most people assume that method will be fast. Could be confusing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So maybe
Welcome
we
to the
just
problems of adding a new primitive.
so maybe we can add this to list of T and some other very specific collections if we care, and then just make a new like I span.
I mean, on normal collection sizes though, like would element-wise and bulk copy really show up? Like most collections are like 8 elements or less. Like probably for loop and memcopy is about the same.
Where this was being used in ML.NET was it was building up like a list of floats for machine learning, right? And then copying it into its buffer when it's done. And so it's not, at least the use case where I bumped into it wasn't a case where the list was relatively small.
Yeah, I think adding that on the concrete type like list of T where we know what the performance profile is makes sense. I'm just wondering how much value we get out of adding some default implementation on an interface. I mean, the only benefit we could have is saying like, you know, for most collection types, element-wise, you know, writing it into the span is probably going to be about the same performance as you could have done it anyways. And then, but there might be some types that specialize this and they just do it faster, but you're not getting worse performance, right? Which is the double copy would make things worse.
I think I would be okay with implementation so long as we also said that we were going to build that implementation for all the built-in.
Yeah.
At least all the important ones. Like the
Yeah,
tree isn't really going to be able to do better than doing its own walk and, and fill.
So this is the first time where we get the suggestion.
I mean, list of T is the worker thing, right? I mean, list of T has received a lot of like underlying span, for example, as well. Like, I mean, it is the high performance, like build a buffer kind of thing, right? And like that's.
Can we start with list of T as the first?
Yeah, I was about to say like.
Get more suggestions.
Yeah, like that was my like. If we add it here, if we think about what we would want it to look like on the interface, we add it here, and then we can still reserve the right to go back and add it on the interface.
Yeah.
And then it'll just get bound by having the same. Effectively dump type.
So let's talk about that first overload.
What does the count do?
Yep. So, like if you look at the existing CopyTo overload, right? Like the difference here between our normal span to span APIs is normally you get your span sliced and counted, your source span sliced and counted to where you want it to be, and then you copy it into a destination, right? But in list, you don't have a slice operator, or you can't get where you want, and so that's why this overload exists. Is the index is the index into the list, and the count is how many elements to count. And if you just have a list and then a destination span, there's no way of saying both of those things.
But why do we need count? Why can't the user just slice the span to the number of? Sorry, what was that?
Because you want to do a sub.
Right. So I understand the span. I understand int index span t span. I don't understand why we also need a count, because you could just have index and span, and then the user can slice the span to the appropriate count.
So you just fill whatever.
Basically, the span would contain the.
What in the cases where you have the list is 10 elements long, the span is 5 elements long.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems more like an error than it is,
Well,
to be honest.
I mean, if,
Right.
like, so so one of the things is if you're filling a span, you must always return the number of things written to it. So they can't be void. They need to either out the answer or return an int. Probably return an int. And then the question is, do we say that the short span is I want less than your, like, this is the buffer I'm working with, just fill it and return the count if there's still more data, or is it an exception? Because if it's an exception, then we need to try CopyTo. So like, there's a whole bunch of behavior that needs to be defined for this method before we can understand what it needs to do.
How does
Also, the span should be called
For
destination.
the top one?
Yep.
For the first one?
Yep. Clearly, if I give an
I think
index
it's
too
pretty
big, that's
obvious
an
what it
exception.
does, given the current parameters.
Yeah, I would expect this to behave identically to the existing array-based overloads. Like if I give you something that's too small, it throws an exception.
Yeah, but then there's
100%.
also the case of you don't want to copy an entire large list to a span. You might want to just copy out segments of it.
Yeah.
In which case, ideally, there would be an overload that allows you to do that, with it returning the number of elements copied into it if there's less than that filled the span, and potentially, and just having that, you can then say how many elements are left in the array from the index. You can say how much of the span was used, how much of it's still available, etc.
So looking at the one on list, the one that takes just an array and an offset, so the middle one on the existing. That one calls array.copy, passing the list size into for the size. So if you give it too small, it will throw. The top one, of course, respects the top one. The question is, which one? Do we think that the span one is inherently array, index, and count, so it's the top one, or is it the middle one?
So what'll be even better is if you are intending to call the very, very first method, and you accidentally leave off the last parameter, you get the span over because of it.
Yes.
Yes, you had the second one, you added the index, and now you're a different method.
Yeah.
You're a different method family.
I mean, we could rename it, right? To not have be overloads with the array if you.
Why? Sorry. I mean, but would it change semantics? It wouldn't, right? It would do the same thing.
It would change semantics.
It depends on if one of them throws and the other one writes less data.
Because the semantics would change because you say index, array, index, meaning I'm intending to start writing to the array at this index. You accidentally leave off count, and now the array index parameter that you passed in is treated as a count because it matches the span overload.
Should we just
Oh, but hold
have
on,
a
like-
second, like the first overload without the count, swap the span and index and make its default arc? At this point, like, you know, count can be tried.
I don't understand like your scenario. Like, can you say
So CopyTo
yes?
0, new int array of 10,
Yes.
5.
Yes.
Which of those 5 overloads is it?
Well, you're saying the switch from array index to count.
Yeah.
Is the problem.
I have passed you a T array, but I've only provided 3 total arguments. T array is implicitly convertible to span of T, so yeah.
But is count in optional? Okay.
Well, but it's in the top one, you have to, there is no 3 argument for it. So you would get a compile error. You don't get a compile error when writing this, you get the other one. So it's not, this isn't like you recompile and your behavior changes. This is, you walk down the wrong path. So this actually violates the rule of you have the same type in the same position with a different semantic. So this is not a legal overload.
Correct.
Let's call the first one copy rate.
Or copy to span.
Yeah, copy to
Both
span
of them
would be
copy
my-
to span.
That would be my. We would do that.
And then we can make the order be whatever we want instead of trying to match the existing guy.
Did we settle on a wanting both an index and a count overload to this method? Or was there still a question there of whether we should have this at all?
What if we remove count from the span overloads? Why does it not work again?
Right.
Because
So
the span has a length. So that would be.
Yeah, basically, the question is, do you want to require the span to be at least as large as the buffer, or do you want the user to have to explicitly say the count?
Do you want, if the
thing-
list has length 10 and you give it a span of capacity 5,
Yes.
does it return 5 or throw an exception?
Well, in that case, it would have to just fill 5, right? Because the whole
What
point
about-
would be that you.
I would
What
throw
about the one that
exception.
doesn't take
But that's
an
not how
index?
the array one works.
Yeah.
But that is how most span stuff works
It-
today.
Not depends
But
on the
because-
API. Like
because you can
span.copy
slice-
doesn't partial fill.
Because you can slice the source down, right? And all this span stuff today, because you can slice the source down to how big
Yeah.
you want it, then you can make it, copy into some destination. But here you can't slice it a list.
Right. If we were able to slice a list, then we would definitely say, oh, list of t.slice.copy, and call it a day.
Right, but the question is, do you want to force the user to allocate a span that's big enough, and for the default case it throws, or do you want it to fill by default and say how many were written, and then the user can say plus current index number written,
I think
and
for,
then
for
new buffer.
usability's sake, I think this should probably match span of t.copy, which is I'm going to copy everything or I'm going to fail. And the user can specify parameters as proposed here to say, no, I really just wanted a sum.
And also how list of t copy to array work, right?
Yeah.
List of t copy to array will copy everything in the list to that array.
Yeah.
And if it's not big enough, I'm going to say it's not big enough.
Yeah, I think the common case is going to be you want to copy the whole thing out, and it's probably unintentional if you gave it a destination that's too small. I think that's going to be the common case.
Agreed. I think it's exceptional. Like it's you made an error if you did that. If you gave out a span that's too small.
And just adding the span index, we don't want to do. Right?
See, there you can slice that span down
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, you
Just
can,
start
but
it.
I'm saying like if we do that, then the ambiguity goes away. We don't have to rename the method.
Yeah, but we don't have any other APIs that take a span and an index because we expect the call of.
It's just what's worth, right?
This is an interesting problem because this is potentially defining a pattern that we're likely to use throughout the frame.
I just don't like the renaming the method group, I guess.
We don't have to.
Well, if we don't, then yeah. Seems weird though.
I mean, we could just take the hit of the potential ambiguity due to overloads.
I mean, what's weird on this is actually the top copy. The
Yeah.
top copy two should have been array index, comma, list index, comma, count.
Yeah.
Like that index is just in the wrong place.
Agreed.
Because
Agreed.
so
Isn't that the normal source comma destination pattern?
What we could do, if we wanted to avoid the overload madness, is we could do int index, int count, span. I know it's the wrong order, but there's no ambiguity.
What about the one that doesn't take any int? Isn't that ambiguous? with
Span
the
of
one-
t versus t array.
Yeah.
They have the exact same behavior, so I don't know which one's bad.
So yeah,
Yeah.
span if it's too short it'll throw, and if you wanted to start at 0 and go to the span length, then you call it. But the span copy twos, I mean the array ones already should have returned the int of how we didn't for reasons years ago, but our buffer
It
guidance
doesn't
says
because it copies all of everything in the list, right? Unless you've explicitly said the count, it copies everything in the list.
I mean, you know
And
how
it
many
doesn't-
were copied, I mean, aesthetically, right? But just looking at the call side. But,
yeah,
But yeah.
I guess modulo threading, but
yeah. Well, yeah, if threading is involved, all bets
right.
are off. Yeah.
Fair enough. I just like our buffer guidance says. I guess it's the count must be determined. So if it's the count property, but like we're burning, as far as I understand method call patterns, we burn the A register by calling a method anyway. We may as well just put the int.
Yeah. I mean, once we have span, like everything goes to hell. So
So, what would you think of Levi's suggestion? Index, in count, span.
That seems fine. So,
I mean, I wouldn't do it as standard practice. The only reason I even suggested it is because it solves the ambiguity. The downside to that is if we ever wanted to introduce this pattern in the future, like to other collections, we would hopefully follow a more sane overload system or a more sane parameter system.
Well, I mean, I think everybody who does CopyTo probably has the 3 overloads, right?
That first overload is
first overload
strange.
specific to list. It's
Yeah.
not on the.
Those on the interface. I'm saying if you're on a specific type and you're perf-oriented, I wouldn't be shocked if that exists elsewhere.
That very first overload
Yeah.
with those same parameters in that same order.
Well, I'm not sure what the order.
Can
Yeah,
I search
but
by
like,
signature on APIs of .NET?
no, you cannot. I tried that, but then bad things happen.
I mean, just type CopyTo. How many possible APIs could there be?
Probably more than it's willing to show me.
Actually, I
it's
don't,
not that many.
I don't think so.
On APIs of .NET, there's only like 30 to 50.
I think I showed 200, so it's clearly less than that. So
Okay.
I think that's the total list of things we have.
Yeah. I think this is just the one outlier.
All right, so string.
Oh, and that's probably what this was based off of then.
Probably.
Okay, fair enough.
So then, are you fine with that then?
And if we did want to make an I can copy to span interface on list, we would just have an explicit interface implementation. Whatever.
If
Mm.
the list doesn't have the I list. The copy twos right now come from my collection. My collection doesn't have one that takes it off.
Do we want int index in count span, or do we want span comma int index comma int count?
Span, comma, int index, comma, int count conflicts with the second. It does, because in the, but when
But that one would have the exact same semantics.
when you're typing
This index,
Yeah.
this index is the index into the list, and the one up above, the array index,
Yeah.
is
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
index into.
Because that's the writing offset
Yeah.
as opposed to the reading.
Yeah.
to avoid the hash. What order do we call these parameters? Did buffer.
I still kind of don't get why we chose to.
Because the semantic that we have with the array one is the one that doesn't take account rows if it's too small. And we're just not changing the semantic. So you have to have the
So
count
it
one.
doesn't throw, or it does throw.
It does throw.
If you call list.copy2, the list is 10, the array is 5, that throws an exception that your list is so that your destination array is too small.
Basically, the rationale is if you give me a buffer without specifying sizes, the assumption is the buffer has to have enough elements to store the entire list. And if you don't want that, if you're prepared to get partial results, then well, you do the math. You tell us how many things you actually want to have.
Eric, how often is it that you're going to be copying partial lists as opposed to the entire list into
Whenever,
Smaller than the list.
yeah, whenever,
But
I
the
think the
function
common
thing
case
does
would be you
count
want to
already, right?
chunk your data.
Yeah.
You've got a list that's got
Yes,
like
that's-
1,000 elements.
for
for
debate.
ML.NET,
So does
yes, but for the rest of the world,
Yeah,
Well, I
you've
mean,
got
like-
a large list and you want to chunk processing of it. I mean, UX does this sometimes. You just want to parallelize or chunk your data so you're not
because
having
what I'm trying
mass
to reason
copies.
about is if we could say use collection marshal without actually driving a significant number of customers, because the type is inherently dangerous.
I mean, I would say the reason people use span here is because they clearly want to do some sort of bulk processing where performance matters, right? At that point, you want to chunk probably, right?
You want to, you're doing some stuff, you want to operate on like 5 things at a time. You could do it yourself with the enumerator, but this saves you a bunch of, or lets you be more declarative in your code.
And in those scenarios, you specifically want to copy list data to another span for processing, rather than just get a span that represents the data already in the list.
Well, not
Oh, I see what
everyone
you're
wants
saying.
to use the unsaved class if they don't have to, and they could be having updates happen to it. Some
I mean, updates happening to this simultaneously is basically on. So
I mean, that's kind of the thing here, right? If more than one thread is involved, bad things will happen.
yeah, because what I'm afraid of is that we're going to introduce an API that doesn't actually solve the performance needs of people, and then everyone's going to use collection marshal anyway. And at
Yeah, I
that
think-
point, why did we introduce this?
No, I think this one, I mean, Eric can talk more to it, but I mean, there's plenty of scenarios where you really want to copy the data, right? Because you're just using list of T as a builder, and then your end result goes elsewhere, right? In which case, CopyTo makes sense. But then the target you may not have handy as a T array, right?
That's exactly what happens in ML.NET.
Okay.
Is we have this thing called a V buffer that exposes its data as a span. And so, yeah, you're building up some sort of data, and then now when I'm done building it, I want to put it into the V buffer.
Okay.
But I think you have a point, right? If there is a way to get the span out of the list of T, then we don't have to add any of these methods, right?
We don't.
Because
I don't want to drive people toward the marshal classes just as a matter of course.
Yeah.
I think we're all
I
in
mean,
agreement. That
logically,
that's,
it feels like this. It feels logically like this should be here, right? Like
it does.
almost everywhere. I mean, not everywhere else, but in a lot of other places that took an array before and then array index and count, we were like, oh, let's add an overload for span.
So what we could do, I think we're all in agreement that last overload makes sense. CopyTo just span with no other parameters. The only one that we're really torn on, it sounds like, is CopyTo that has int span int. What we could do is we could rename that one very specific method to something else like copy partial, I don't know. And then we say, okay, that
Place
method,
and copy.
yeah, and that method now has different semantics, including like you tell us exactly what you're attempting to copy, we'll make a best effort to do so, we'll return the number of things that we copied,
Right,
and so on.
because that one, the one that only takes a span is the only one that we would possibly do as the dim.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at this from iCollection, that's the only one that's a candidate. When we're looking at it from list, then we're having the awkward overload, which means that maybe that was a different method.
So what if we took that first, the first method in the new proposal and just renamed it, for instance, CopyTo partial, and said that API, like you give it the offset that you want to copy from, you give it the span that you want to copy to, and we'll return the number of elements that we copy. Like the method name is different, it has a different behavior than the rest of the CopyTo. And you just have to know what the style is. Read the docs.
I like it.
What was the conclusion I was just having?
So it's not a conclusion, just a proposal.
Okay.
So in the first of the two new methods that's being proposed, CopyTo int span int, rename that method to CopyTo partial, remove the last parameter, just have a starting offset and a span, and it returns an int saying this is how many elements I copied into the span. It doesn't have the same throwing behavior as the other CopyTo methods.
Hold on. You're saying
The return
in
value
copy
would be
to
essentially int.
partial.
I mean, max
Well,
minimum value of
span
length
length
minus
and list
index
count.
and the span length,
We filled the buffer as best we could. This is the number of elements we wrote in the
which is
buffer.
basically minimum value of
Yeah.
length
Is that what you're
minus
proposing?
index.
Span should be called destination.
And in
the other one as well.
Yeah.
But,
In this scenario, index is the index within the list at which
Yeah.
to begin
so
copying.
I would call it list index or list offset.
And the only time this method will ever throw is if list index is beyond
Or
the
should we
beginning
call
of
it
the list.
from index?
What's the index?
Source
Source
index.
index,
yeah. But I still don't get why it should return anything. It feels like it's not worth it.
It makes it easier
So like
to...
I understand that if we didn't know what the number of elements were in the list, but we do.
We do. It's just a convenience for if you're doing this in a loop, you can just add it to the
Yeah,
source
the
index on the next
CopyTo
iteration.
is already going to have computed the min. If you want to know how many got copied, why are you repeating the work? Like, return the answer. It's already sitting in a register. We're already burning the A register because we called a function. Just pass it.
So Eric, does that actually solve the scenario that you had? I know that you might have to have some consideration for the CopyTo partial didn't actually complete fully. Is that acceptable? If you might be on mute, we can't hear you if you're talking.
No, I'm still thinking.
Thinking is not very loud.
I mean, at least in ML.NET, the way what we have is a list, source, a span, destination, and then an optional count. And so and then we always say the destination has to be smaller, or the destination has to be big enough to fill the whole thing, right?
Right, but then you would just call this one with source index, comma, destination, dot slice, 0, comma, count.
True, and that will throw an exception if destination's too small.
Yeah, now you validated your count argument. Or you validated your destination against your count. You may not like the exception type, so you may need to repeat the work to change the type. But,
In the case where you're trying to do actual buffering,
Yes, I think it's whatever it returns.
it's
to
either the
destination,
whole,
that's
it's either
right.
the whole list.
if you want the whole list, you call the one that just takes a span. The only time you'd really want the one with an offset is when you have a partial result. Which is why the one that takes the offset from the
Right.
list also takes a count in the other one, so that you can accept a smaller array. This is the same thing. We're changing the method name to indicate why the count is span.length.
Yeah, because the conversation earlier was like, can we use the span length to determine how many elements we should copy? And I think the holdup on that was we shouldn't give it the same name because people would expect the same semantics. So if we change the name, then that's dealt with.
Could we expose it as CopyTo, which is span destination, comma, source index equals 0, and then CopyTo partial with the same ordering?
So that overload that you just mentioned conflicts with TArray int already.
Which has different meaning for the int in the same position.
Yeah. If span of T and TArray weren't convertible with each other, it wouldn't really be a huge issue. But
I think that this is the best answer we're going to get.
I mean, to be perfectly fair, like this does have some smell to it, but it seems like the least.
The thing with that function is it will take me a while to figure out what code I'm supposed to write. Okay, yeah.
That's
Like it's not clear to me that if the span that I pass in is large enough that it's a one-time shot, right?
And we can also add CopyTo int source index span destination. We just don't, that one doesn't get the how far do you want to go, because that's where the ambiguity comes
Yeah, which now means how do you ever get to something that is smaller, right? Yeah, yeah, but then you need two methods, in which case you might as well just.
in. Yeah. I think the answer is if you're working with spans, you're smart enough to figure it out.
yeah, but in general though, we want to we still don't want to force people to do to write that math themselves, because you know the more lines of code you write around this, the more likely you are just to make a this plus should have been a minus and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally a fan of saying you have to pass in the count, right? Because that's the general pattern we have in the BCL. It's just normally it's just an overload that accepts the count. It's not like, oh no, I have to write some loop around it.
Adding
right?
a count here is totally fine.
I think I'd rather have the count added and this returns full
I'd be
for
fine
some
with
reason.
that. The only reason I propose this is because it says we don't have to have the same semantics as CopyTo. Like if we want to add a count, sure.
I don't think even if we have it take a count, we can have it return void unless say throw if there's not at least count elements to copy.
I think Eric, that would be the proposal though, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you tell it you must copy exactly this many elements starting from this index to the destination. And if we can't do that for whatever reason, we just fail.
Would we do that with
I mean, right. You
count?
told us how many to. So
Count defaulted to -1, which means use the span length?
I wouldn't.
I don't see like why would I ever use it with destination?
I just
Which is
always hate
different size
passing
than
APIs
the
with
count.
destination, destination dot length.
So
Like,
the
You knew the
yeah.
destination.
The reason I wouldn't use a magic value for count here is if I'm performing arithmetic in order to populate the count property, I could end up producing -1, at which point I would actually want it to.
Like why just not just do destination dot slice whatever count you want? I don't see how would that be.
Well, it's always about the what is your intent, right? If you call CopyTo and then you pass in an int and you pass in a span, did you ever expect that that span might be smaller than what the list is?
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, do you do that everywhere? Like
No,
We
we don't have a
don't-
single API
yeah.
in the framework where if you pass in,
we just
If
approved
in a re-
HKDF, which exactly does.
HKDF
No,
is a
that's-
very special use case.
It's a fill API.
Yeah.
It uses the span length to fill it. This is, we have an existing API whose semantics are already.
Yeah, like random.getBytes, for instance, populate.
everything, I mean, any API that we have that basically is supposed to be a one, shot API.
Yeah.
Unless you give us the bounds for both source and destination, we assume you always want to copy everything.
No.
We don't have things like, oh, if the destination is smaller, we only give you partial data. Like we don't do that anywhere else.
Or add the count parameter, return void.
But then partial doesn't make much sense, right? Does it?
but it solves the ambiguity with the overload above it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I think at that point, I think we are where we used to be, right? Where we just said,
Honestly,
okay, we have
I don't see the ambiguity. I would never like expect like if I pass the span of 4 bytes, I would expect 4 bytes to be copied unless there's less than I would expect.
I think most people have an expectation that copy methods work similar to span of t.copyto,
And
which
it does.
is all,
I mean,
which is all or nothing. It
but
doesn't
like
do partial.
this destination span kind of implies what the count is going to be.
Span.copyto
No,
allows you to pass-
the source implies what the count is going to be,
Yeah.
right? I'm taking this thing and I'm saying copying it to this other place,
Yeah.
right? Like the
But
source
the other
says
place
this
has a
is how long.
specific length, which
So does the
you know
list.
what upfront.
That's an exception. That's not valid to do that.
It's pretty common during buffer processing to have a destination that you keep slicing from the left over and over and over in a loop. Often you'll pass oversized buffers to APIs like span.copyto, you pass oversized destination, and then you just slice based on how much data you know.
I mean, I'm fine with the current shape, but I personally would prefer if there was a just void and destination. But I don't mind either way.
Well,
But anything,
void-
the count is just confusing.
Void
My
and
opinion.
destination with no index is already yes. He said,
Yeah.
I mean, we need to rename it from span to destination. But that one's solid. It's the one that takes a source offset that we're having trouble with.
I think.
So
I think
would it be the end of the
copy-
world if? Would it be the end of the world if we changed this span one to have int span and then 2 ints? Like, yes, I know everywhere else we don't take a span index when we take a span overload, but at least then it matches the array one.
That's what I suggested as well. Yeah, I think that's within that
That would work
API.
too.
It makes. I think it simplifies the design greatly because the only odd thing is now. Oh, I could have sliced it and passed in 0. Sure, but at least it's self-consistent. You have no ambiguities.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that would work too.
I don't like having the span length not count for anything. I would rather us have the int span int, where the int is a count, and then users who want to do partial copies have to pass in that one extra parameter.
We only tend to use that for full methods, though, as was mentioned previously.
Like, I mean, I'm with Tanner. And I think Christoph, if I would really like, I want copy to partial. But it can't be copy to partial semantics while called CopyTo. And if people are
Yeah.
upset with making a new method group, then int span int int is the best we're going to get. Because then at least nothing's ambiguous and you just keep passing the 0 and get over it.
It might also be more readable as copy to int source index, int source count, and then span destination.
Yeah, but now, like, what we're doing is we're overloading the first method. So all we should do is change t bracket bracket to span of t with angle brackets.
That is going to be the least impactful thing.
Yeah, but then that's just going to be confusing to users where the span length means nothing.
Oh, it means something. If
Just
it's too
like the
small,
array
throw
length.
it.
It means the exact same thing as the array length.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it means.
Yeah, but the arrays you can't slice, and the array index is there that way.
Yeah.
Specifically because you can't slice arrays,
Yeah.
but you can slice spans, so it doesn't make sense in the same context.
I mean, we can do both.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
Both what?
Like, I mean, at that
Copy
point,
to parse.
Int
Copy
span
to-
int int and copy to partial.
Yeah, I guess I would.
I mean, I would.
What I'm
I'm
afraid
fine.
of is that someone's going, like, while this change is being made, someone's going to write the array-based one in terms of the span-based one, and then all hell will break loose.
Both spans should be named destination.
Yeah, I was about to say. I guess the second one is.
Because
Especially
it-
the one named array.
Because that's actually an illegal optimization.
Array, nice.
Right, so this one is this.
This is honestly my least favorite of any of the options. I preferred the original proposal more than this.
I prefer the original proposal shape-wise, but I buy the error
Yeah,
arguments.
I mean, the trouble is the two ints that are together means, so, like, we have overload guidance, which is don't let the same type in the same position have a
Yeah.
different semantic.
Especially because
So we
list,
can't eliminate the array.
list is such a commonly used type. Like, I would be deathly afraid of adding anything to list that could cause people to accidentally fall into a bit of failure.
And honestly,
then the
they're probably just going to call the simple copy too.
But then the copy to partial avoids us from needing to pass around too many arguments, especially for the span case, which is meant to be generally more efficient. It
Yeah.
avoids the ambiguity. And people who want to do a copy starting from some index and doing the entire length can either write their own simple helper class that does the additional check, or add their own assertion logic that spans at least the length of the array.
I like reducing the two arguments, getting the and fill semantic, but it's not like we're blowing past anybody's call convention.
But to be clear,
We're
this is the
going to.
proposal, right?
Are we?
Yeah, it's
The span is 2 arguments.
Right, and on Linux, span gets passed in 2 registers, not 1. And on Windows, it's passed by reference on the stack.
Right.
That's the implementation detail.
But 5 is still before the stack spill.
No, I think it's 4 is the stack spill.
I don't think we should cover the implementation details during the API reviews.
We should actually.
This is span. Span means caring about things like the number of registers that are going into a method is actually important.
Oh,
That
and
was-
we can
yeah.
fix this in the future. Right?
don't forget this is 5 because this parameter is passed as well.
Implementation details, I was actually arguing should be discussed more.
6 is the Linux thing, which means this does not stack spill.
Yes, but on Windows it will because Linux is 4 and this parameter is also.
No, Linux is 6.
No, Windows
But
is.
you said on Windows
Okay.
it will because Linux is 6.
Okay.
Or because Linux is 4.
Windows
There's a
is
difference between
4,
different
and so
classes.
you've got this parameter plus the 4 others, so you're going to end up
Stack
stack spilling one of them. And then on Linux, if it's 6, you'll end up exactly meeting the count.
So copy to partial is exactly not stack spill.
We're also assuming that spans.
Well, on Linux, span won't be because it's passed in 2 registers. On Windows, it will be, but Windows only has 4 registers for passing, and you've got this parameter, so you've got 5 parameters total, in which case.
Doesn't matter.
Well, because this is really about can we avoid people calling the collection marshal to do the thing that they wanted?
And I think CopyTo partial and CopyTo with just the span is probably the simplest way to do that, and to provide all the desired semantics.
Okay, let's step back for a moment. Let's say we go with this proposal. Are we okay with making this the general pattern for any collection type that wants span support?
No. That
Why not?
copy2 method that we just added, like, if list of t did not already have that first copy2 method, like, we would never add a method with signature.
Yeah.
Literally the only reason we're doing it is because there's precedent on it.
Yes, we would
No,
have it as
I'm
copy
asking
to destination, comma.
I'm asking about copy partial. So if we don't do those, right? If we only do this, are we okay with making that the general pattern?
We don't know.
I would still, we
Well,
still need a copy too.
I mean,
that
it's
just
only
takes
for
the
things
span.
that take the index, right? There are only 2 copy twos that start with a source index in all of the framework.
No, I
List
get
and
that.
string.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is that what I don't want to do is I don't want to say, oh, on list of T we have copy partial with a weird signature. Everywhere else we just have copy 2 that takes an int index, a span destination, and an int count. That would be very weird in my opinion.
Like, well, so I guess we have the opportunity to fix it here once we're a different method. I think that it should be destination, comma, source index, because then it's a proper overload of copy 2.
And you can make it default to 0.
Hold on. Like, okay, let me fix this first. So, like, okay, let's first agree on what we want this overload to look like. You would make it look like how? You would say,
I would just say destination and then source index.
Don't all of our other buffer APIs take all source related arguments before all destination?
yeah, I was about to say, I
arguments?
thought source comes before destination. I mean, you wrote the guidance, you should know. But
So we do say source comes before destination, but then it's kind of hand wavy on I mean, I did have an example specifically where when you have the source, the problem is the source is this, and that's messing everything up. Everything that we reviewed when we did the buffer stuff and we talked about source and destination are static methods. So source was always an argument, and source index lived next to source.
Which it still can.
The problem is you don't see this.
Well, I
So-
mean, it's before the dot in copy partial.
But if we were to write this, like we have copy, right, and that fills the span, and copy with a slightly different semantic of starting at this point. So like,
oh, but you bring up an
design this
interesting
one
design
like-
alternative, right? We don't have to add them as instance methods.
Make it a static method.
We could make that a static method anywhere else, and then we can order the arguments probably however we want. I don't know where we would put it, but like, I
we
mean,
could have a static list of T,
Oh, just put it on the list.
copy.
We have a list class.
or we could,
like,
like
why
I
is-
mean, buffer or whatever.
It's
I
like,
would
why is
put
this a
it somewhere.
static method when it could have been an instance method? Because we couldn't agree on the parameter.
So if this were a static method, what would it look like? Or maybe this should be taken off.
Well, it depends on where you put it. I would like same problem as here. I would make it a sound overload on whatever else this type already has. Right?
It would be copy list, comma, or list source, comma, source index, comma,
Source
destination,
count,
comma, count. Or we would say destination that link.
I think
count is a non-source
But
parameter.
why would
so
you?
we get
But
that.
I would honestly say the count should probably be source count, and then you just have the span at the end because
I guess that's true, because if you were doing like I want to digest part of an array, we would say array offset count. So
Yeah.
it's this part goes to this part.
yeah.
So maybe the weird part is copy2 should have been index, comma, count, comma, array, comma. It was mirroring array dot copy2, which was
But that's an interesting.
source and
question.
sourcey, or two sources, two destinations.
You were saying, Tanner?
Eric, I think, had tried to comment. I don't think we only want copy partial. I thought we wanted also the copy to
We do.
span array with
Yeah.
no other argument.
Well, span destination.
I
I'm not gonna call it
think
span array.
I think we're set on doing that regardless. I don't think that's ever been contentious.
Yeah, you know, I assume Nemo's erasing it.
So well,
The
what do we-
second one there.
The one that just takes a span, nothing else.
Yeah.
Like I haven't heard any pushback against that at all.
So that's the
So
one
it's
that
not-
if we were to,
Yeah, this one seems fine. I mean, nobody said anything about this one.
Yeah, the names are.
Yeah, like, but what about this shape? Does this? Has anybody has an opinion to that shape? Because I mean, that's basically what we just said.
I had suggested that earlier, and I thought someone said no.
No,
Doesn't-
that does not conflict.
yeah, it
with
doesn't
any of the
conflict,
other
and
The thing I like about this one is if we did have a
the other
slice,
one.
that's the way you would have written it, right? You would have said list, slice,
other one.
index, count,
Yeah.
and then copy to this destination, right? It's in that order. That's the thing I like about it.
I would still put, like, index as a bare word seems weird here. I'd still call it source index.
Yes, and then source
Yeah,
count.
probably.
Uh,
It just
Count is
count
for both.
doesn't
Count's
matter.
the count.
Count is for both. So.
It's the amount of work you're doing.
Yeah, but this count here has to be that length, right? So
Yeah, well, that's just the copy.
No, it
has
just
to
needs
be
to be
at
less
least
than or equal.
less than. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Has to be less than or
the span can be too big.
sure.
But
Fair
the
enough.
span can't be too small. It has to be at least.
I guess what I'm saying is that to me, logically, this whole thing, this plus source index plus count is the source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I would probably call it source count.
Fair.
But like, I don't know.
All right.
And so if we had those first two, I don't think we need copy partial. It's just a nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest this. I would delete this here.
Yeah.
I would just and then call it a day.
Yeah, and I'd be happy with
Okay.
It would work for me too. I still kind of randomly question source count versus count, but that's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
In general, like I think that if we have a counter that's applying to both things, we call it count. If it's applying to
Yeah, I don't have strong opinions. If people prefer count, I can totally
count
go for it.
feels cleaner to me, but I can't explain why, and I won't complain if you want to call it source count.
I'm with Jeremy on this.
It's
All right.
it's shorter, and I don't.
Since
it's not
everybody
a deal.
seems to think count is better, I go with count. All right, so then.
All right, that only took 30 minutes. I'm going to
All right.
Thank you, Eric.
I like source count better, but I don't want to fight about it. So
Wow, that
Do you
took.
like source count better?
yeah, I like source count better, but I don't want to fight about it.
I didn't really want to fight about it either.
Next week, I should just bring like cakes or something.
Number of elements.
Perfect.
But is it cupcakes, or is it
Okay,
something else?
No, like just regular cupcakes. Then we'll all go into a food. No one will be able to get anything.
Was it an array of cupcakes, or was it a span of cupcakes?
Last I checked, cupcakes. So I guess it wouldn't matter.
All right, so I wrote this. Are we okay with that?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Good. All right, then. Wow, 30 minutes. That's a new low for an API review, but
Really?
yeah, not really, I guess.
isn't there an API proposal to add similar overloads to the immutable? I think Andy Goki had been proposing it. The only reason I ask is because immutable list of T has the same CopyTo overloads as list of T probably.
I don't think
now we
anybody
have
cares about
precedent.
immutable
Yes.
list, but immutable array is certainly one thing that we would care about high performance. Immutable list is horrible, right? It's
All
basically
right,
a
that's
tree.
a tree.
It's
not a
so
list.
basically that one is like if you care about perf and data density, that's not the type you want. I'm still somewhat sad that that did not occur to me 5 years ago, or whenever we did it.
Immutable array has the exact same signature. Yep.
Yeah. And that's why I was kind of keen on establishing a pattern that we like, because I don't want to have this discussion every single time as a one-off. All right, then let's close this one here.
This one can no longer be done. We've lost our window for doing this work.
Oh, is that the break and change thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can still do it in FIFO though. Why can we do?
System text JSON and so many other components now have a dependency on this type. Like I think we've literally lost our window.
You would just rather not close it and say we not don't.
I mean, if we're willing to say we would consider a break and change to this API surface, even though so many additional projects are now taking dependencies on it, then we could consider it. But until that point, like,
Technically, we haven't shipped 3.1 yet. You can't argue.
I would not.
I mean, we have done.
What's the break and change policy for 5.0?
You saw the DCR for WinForms, right? So I would say this seems fine. Just saying. Like,
Okay, let me. I didn't realize this was coming back up. Let's punt this.
Yeah.
Let me redo this proposal,
Okay.
and
I mean, there's a
let
certainly
me avoid
time window
awesome.
problem, but I mean, I think we convinced ourselves earlier that the impact seems relatively low, right? Because the only parties that would have to change code are people that extend that, which is basically is only first party,
Right.
and they're all the shipping in box.
Well, and ASP.NET.
And this is to get the
Sure, but they also ship logically in box. Right?
abstract pointer-based one no longer abstract and/or deleting it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Basically deleting all of the existing abstracts.
So yeah, the fact
Yeah.
that the current abstract takes a pointer
It's not
means
great.
essentially
It's
nobody's extending
it's
this.
not just that it takes a pointer; it's that the method. So the method's abstract takes a pointer and marked editor browsable never, which means that if you were to try subclassing it, you don't know what to do.
Well, I think normally you get a squiggle and Roslyn where you just control dot and it writes the method for you, right?
Yes. And then you get
Maybe, but-
and then you get a compiler error because it's like you
But
need
you're
to
like-
add allow unsafe blocks.
Yes.
for
Yeah, you're like
users. That's
override,
blocked.
and it's like, no, there's nothing you can override. It's like, oh, you want to override equals? Yeah, hash code? Yeah, those are the only virtual.
I'm not sure override completion
So let's-
honors editor
so let's
Roslyn,
pop
but
this
like
for
yeah.
now, but
Let's
it's-
actually like
it's a
skip
fun
this
time.
one here. Is it assigned to you? It is assigned to you. Good. I leave the
It's
mouse
assigned to me,
alone
yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
All right. Expose match length when using String.IndexOf
Yes,
and content
please,
specific code.
please do it.
I like this. This is clearly German. I can see that from here.
Yeah.
Lots of streets going on.
So in
Hauptstrasse.
in a
Golly.
nutshell, I can actually speak to this. In a nutshell, when you're doing string comparisons,
You guys got muted, by the way.
What?
Oh yeah, we did.
Oh, what happened?
I don't know. But
Here we go.
There,
So-
we can hear you now. Thank you.
In a nutshell,
We were live though. Like we were not muted on YouTube.
you should obviously
Oh.
watch us on YouTube.
Only on.
When we're doing culture-aware string comparisons, including the invariant culture, because the invariant culture is still a culture, and when I say culture-aware, I mean as opposed to ordinal, it is possible for matches to be of different lengths than the things that they're matching. For example, the German S set is a single char. However, it also matches the two chars, lowercase s, lowercase s. That means that if you were to, for instance, compare a string which just contained the S set, its length is 1, and you were to compare a string which is two lowercase s's, length 2, they would compare as equal under German current culture.
Let me say this as a member of the German culture.
Yes.
Some people apparently do not want software written for them because how is anybody supposed to get this right?
So,
Well, but Emo,
by the
are
way,
you
UTF-8 string
young
gets
enough
this
to want
right.
to delete the S set?
I'd be okay with that because clearly, like, how do you reason about rules like that? Like, that's impossible.
So let me also say, like, the proposed API surface I have for UTF-8 string does not have this as an issue. for various reasons that I'll not get into.
All right. So
But
what's
You just
the-
don't have index off, or like what?
I don't have index of.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like that's one way to solve the problem. It's like, yeah, we don't answer questions.
So
like
what
that.
I would actually do is the proposal that I have for UTF-8 string, I would actually bring that forward to string. What that is instead of having index of, it has a method which is called tryfind. And that method returns a bool and outs a range, which is this is where I found the match. If you want everything before you found the match, substring range.begin. If you want everything after the match, substring range.end ... stuff like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, index of also isn't the most convenient to call when you call some
Correct.
string comparison, and then also dealing with the match length seems like.
Because it's not just here, you also need to make changes to things like the culture text info type, I think. System globalization, whatever.
So you have tryfind and tryfind last.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm cool with tryfind. Instead of doing this, doing tryfind.
It's
I think that makes more sense. Yeah.
I mean, the downside to that is, like, we're now exposing range as a first-class concept through these APIs and deal with it as a type rather than just language semantics.
Yeah. I think
Maybe index of is easier for people to reason about because it's an existing method.
So how about this then? I assign this to you,
Okay.
and then you can propose what you want to do there. Because it seems like we need a different API proposal from what we currently have here. I mean, outputting range is probably fine.
Yeah. This API proposal does work, but I have been experimenting with other things that I think would be more suited for success.
Yeah, like really, it's the comment of if you were already solving this problem in a different way in UTF-8 string, we want the two of them to agree before we move.
Yeah.
Let me enter this here.
Also, because this actually has impact beyond just string and beyond just memory. It's like it touches system globalization, it touches a bunch.
Yeah, let me do API needs work.
For UTF-8 string is actually because case can involve different right.
All right, so then we have that one. Let me, given that we have a few minutes left.
I hate to bring back up the CopyTo thing, but after we moved away, I found out that String Builder has the CopyTo with int span int, along with CopyTo int array int int.
Sorry, let me actually.
And so basically the why we switched the ints around, like String Builder already has that pattern.
Is stringbuilder.copyTo called anywhere near as commonly as like list of T?
Shocked, honestly, but
I'd be shocked.
so CopyTo.
It's just that when we
String
go to the
Builder,
next one, right? We were talking about setting patterns. Next one, somebody could look at String Builder and be like, "Oh, they use this pattern," and then list and use.
I think the answer is we're content to say String Builder got it wrong.
Yeah, that would be my vote as well.
Heresy.
Turns out most of the framework guidelines are written for we did this and we didn't like it, so now it says do not.
I mean, that kind of makes sense because we don't realize that we need a guideline until we regret our decisions.
Right.
I mean, funny enough, the CopyTo that takes int array index and count on list of t is used less than the corresponding string builder version.
That's hilarious.
String builder is 7.7%, and the other one is 5.8 or something. So
Yeah, but list, you already had good alternatives for how you can get the data out. Could enumerate it, etc. Now the string builder one is weird because it's a very specific API on that. You also, yeah, the list can pull from that.
I mean, you could always enumerate the string builder as well. I think we only recently added the chunk-based enumeration, but yeah, I mean, my cat level is at this point, I think, low because we feel like we talked it to death. I can go either way at this point. I think I buy the argument, and I think it's unfortunate that we made that mistake on string builder. But string builder is also not the type that all up is used
Yeah, I think
frequently.
it's possible that we
Never
just
mind.
cared less on string builder. List is very central, and maybe we just thought about it. But I think we did a lot better on list than the one that.
I mean, list all up is used more, but
Yeah.
I mean, to be clear, when I say more, list of t is like 90%, and string builder is like 73%. So like
Yeah.
they are both in the it sucks if you get this wrong territory.
But I feel
Okay.
string builder's most common thing is you call it him and then you call it to string.
That is also true.
It's a very different pattern.
I mean, I think the question earlier still stands, right? Like, if we were to make this a general pattern, what would you rather do? And I think the shape we currently have, we feel more warm and fuzzy about than the other one.
Right. Because if you look at it from the pure span perspective, it would be effectively this dot slice offset count close paren dot copy to destination, and that's the signature that you
Right.
came up with, or you and Tanner came up with. So we just removed a close parenthesis and a dot.
Clearly, the first
Okay.
parameter should be a system.
We can vote for real. Close it now. I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
everybody was okay with.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Priority is important. All right, so now we still have a few minutes left. Funny enough, I wasn't expecting that. How about this one here?
Oh. Because we should be using volatile dot instead.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I would maybe even go a step further and say maybe we should obsolete them.
So remember how we were talking a few days ago about like various levels of obsolescence? One being like this would work, it's just not the way to write modern.
Yeah,
I
I
wonder
mean,
if maybe something like that would
I
apply.
mean, honestly, this is also like something that would be hilariously easy to write a fixer for, right? It's like you literally call the other API.
Well, yeah, I guess you remove the thing left of the dot and you add a dot in the middle.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's literally a string replace fixer here.
Would it make sense to just obsolete it? Like, I don't see why it would be.
The thing is, like, it's
if we're obsoleting it, we should add a browsable never is so that you
Yeah.
never see it again in new code.
like the method works and will continue to work. It's not. It's only obsoleted because there's a better replacement.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you a different question. I mean, I think the general thing for obsolescence is meant to give the developer a heads up, right?
Yeah.
And I think if it's just not idiomatic code, I think just shipping a fixer that would turn the the one code side to the other code side seems fine, because you basically get the squiggle as soon as you edit it. When you open it, you get a squiggle. That's fine. Now the question is, would we actually want to give people a build warning for that? And I think the answer for that would be, if it was literally like this API calls this other API, there's nothing wrong with the API, I think it's probably not worth it. The only case where I could see this being still useful is if we actually consider yanking out the API for cleanup, right? But then again, like, these APIs are probably used a fuck ton, so I'm not sure we would convince ourselves that making an API breaking change for what amounts to be an aesthetic issue would be worth it.
I think there was a desire to get people off of the thread class more generally, because it's not always possible, especially when we're talking about new execution environments, to talk about threads.
These are static.
These are statics, but if we're thinking of removing If we're thinking that there might be environments where we just don't have the concept of a thread at all, then maybe the entire type goes away.
I don't
Not
think
just the instance members
we'll
of the
ever
type.
say that because the language or the runtime spec already says that system threading thread is not an OS thread. It's a managed thread,
Yeah.
which could be a fiber, it could be anything.
Right.
So there's no environment where you can't not have a thread.
But if it's meaningless in such an environment,
Yeah.
Well, you still have things like thread local, you still have volatile reads and writes, and in those environments, if we were to specialize for them, then we could just say that these don't actually do volatile reads and writes. They do a normal read and write because that's functionally safe from a single thread perspective in an environment where there is only a thread.
I mean, looking at usage seems to be relatively low for those APIs, like less than 1%.
We
So
got rid of them.
I could see us actually yanking them out.
yeah.
If we
So
really cared.
I know that we were going to talk at some point about like which APIs we should consider
Yeah.
having analyzers for or yanking. Like we should throw that on the pile.
Now, how do we do that? Like, do we have it? Do we have a label for this? Probably not, right?
I might actually leave it ready for review and just come back to it later.
Yeah. Let me actually. I know what to do now. Let me just mention the term analyzer, and then I have an easier time finding it later. Thanks to my note taking.
Out of town, we could add labels, and no one will yell at us.
The repos are about to merge anyways, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, nobody cares about labels anymore. This seems like a good candidate for
Yeah,
places.
we lose the ability to edit code
Console.
in 30 hours.
No, we don't lose the ability to edit code. We can still we still have access to the repo internally, the new one.
But it won't necessarily be building yet. So we shouldn't really be editing code.
Oh, you're right.
That means that if I
So would we? So let me ask you a different question. Would we ever consider just putting editor browsable on it? Because it seems reasonable to just hide the APIs for now, at least.
I think that even if we were going to obsolete it, we would. Editor browsable never. So doing that now is
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think we can improve this as proposed,
Yeah.
and it's like,
there's just more work we could
But
do.
without having something like an analyzer that's telling people this is why we put editor browsable never on it, we might just.
the 1% of API people that call this API, they probably know what they're doing.
Because it will, nothing, for people already using it, it won't cause a problem.
It won't cause a problem for existing code as far as compilation goes, but if you have to maintain existing code, it might cause problems.
Yes, but we have an entire year until these APIs ship. So we have an entire year in which to get an analyzer or update the documentation or anything. And as long as we're tracking that to get done, or saying docs need to be updated as part of this implementation.
Well, I'm kind of like not in favor of editor browsable. It's like, let's say I learned this API and I don't know the new one exists. Now I want to find this API and I don't know what the new one is. I don't even like, I'm typing that in, and the IntelliSense doesn't show up anything.
Well, but a fixer.
Then you go look at the docs, and the docs say.
So, but I cannot find the API I used to have.
Yeah,
That's
so
the problem.
you go to a browser and you Bing the name of the thing you're looking for to find out where it got deleted, and it's like, oh, call volatile.read instead.
Yeah.
But you don't know what got deleted because you type thread dot and it's like, I don't remember what this used to be called.
Yeah, because that's just something
But
we
I
need
would
to
rather
do in
like
general.
have this show up and then I should see the error. Okay, change this to whatever.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't have to open
I
the
mean,
browser.
there's an opportunity for like IntelliSense more generally to help with these sorts of issues.
Maybe if editor browsable never had a call this API instead, and then it completes to that instead. Like it shows it, but when you tab it, it completes together.
Because one of the things that I had wanted is like, it doesn't show up in IntelliSense unless you call the API somewhere else in your code, and then at that point it's
I mean, like really what we want in that case is a special level.
I talk about parameter aliases.
yes.
That way we can go and fix all.
It is defined by hash algorithm. It just does async read and calls hash core, the same as the stream one does.
That works for me.
It's not virtual either.
Skip it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so,
make it non-virtual.
all right, let me just copy and paste the whole thing then. And
Yeah,
then
so we only want the top method in this number.
let me go here.
Right, yeah,
so
I don't know why I wrote virtual in there.
Your excuse.
The existing one might be.
It's not. The existing one's non-virtual.
Good.
I don't know why I made that virtual.
Okay, I'm kind of curious. Go to the new version. Can you update it for you?
There is a very long email thread about that, right? In theory, you're supposed to be able to, but apparently we may have broken something.
All right, so then let me get this right. We would say it's non-virtual task of byte, ComputeHash Async. It still takes an optional cancellation token. And the second one.
Input stream matches the non-async for parameter name.
Yes,
And then
correct.
takes a cancellation token, vaulted. The only thing you can.
I think the reason I had proposed a string-based hash is so that you could call it passing in multiple different streams, like if you had like some type of weird mime. It might not be a valid scenario.
I think the reason you made it virtual is because HashCore is virtual.
HashCore is virtual, yeah.
So you
But
probably
it has to be.
yeah. So you probably made both virtual due to that.
Yeah, because HashCore is the actual workhorse. It definitely. We could always add HashCore async in the future if we need it.
Too long.
Okay, that's fine. I like that answer.
All right.
So the only thing you need to do async is read from the string. There's nothing like every implementation we ever have from this goes to the OS and needs byte erase. There's needs straight buffers.
Yeah,
There's no-
I guess the scenario was like, again, if I'm pulling data from multiple sources and making a hash based on all of them.
the issue list real quick?
Like, because ComputeHash right
With
now
the
says this
order
is the
from all
one and
this
only
to-
one. You can't take like here's an array, here's a string, here's another array, put them all together.
Okay.
Can you create a
Since
string
the
stream,
top one
and then
is
You have to
still
make
the top
combine-
one,
you have to
combine
fabricate
and
your
it
own
is now
string.
unblocked. Do we have anything scheduled for next week, or can I invite the compiler folks that want to discuss it?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you like where we are with that
You-
because it
you
seems
can-
like we made some progress.
Listen,
with
Right,
that.
it should be completely
I mean,
unblocked,
it might not be.
and we just
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
make sure
that
we
would
invite the
work.
compiler folks
Yeah.
to the API review meeting.
So what happened to the half one? I thought the half one was shut down. No.
The half proposal is that one,
Yeah, but is
but
it?
we've not decided what. Basically, that's still pending.
Does not support string.
What do we need to do to expose it if the
You can delete
language
yourself.
is going to support operators in the future?
Okay.
But it sounds like they're not doing language support for the type for this.
That's good. Right.
Timo, is this list up to date?
Well, it says up to date as of like.
Did you not change the HMAC?
Oh, I did. I just clicked refresh. Oh, it's gone. All right.
Having fewer methods always makes it.
There's a couple on there
more
for the
overloads people want
arbitrary
to
I can mark this
you then?
done because
Yeah.
they were done last week. Because they're duplicates of other issues we reviewed.
Sounds good. All right.
Assigned to you.
Bye bye, guys online.
Bye.